Hey guys, so life is good. It's a beautiful Saturday morning. The weather is wonderful. I have a giant bag of Doritos sitting by me. So if I periodically pause to take a break, you know why that is. And they are having the mother of all parties across the street still. So life is good. First college football games are today. I'm in a good place with this. Now, we're going to shift gears. Everything we've done so far is about Europe, rise of Europe, Europe becoming a powerhouse. Where did this come from? How did this happen? Well, there's still other parts of the world, and there's still other, empires in the world. Next empire we want to talk about, or next type of empire we want to talk about, are the land-based empires. We said the European empires are global and they are maritime. Well, just like in period one, though, you're going to see land-based empires. And the land-based empires frequently are in the same parts of the world that we saw land-based empires in period one. Now, there's some common traits all these empires have in common. All these empires will have all the traits of a period one land-based empire. Incorporating groups of common people in their government, ethically, linguistically, religiously diverse, all that stuff, but keep pounding in your head. They're going to have these traits. One thing that's going to be new about them, though, is they're going to build these empires using guns, cannon, and gunpowder. So new technologies that have developed will allow these groups of people to build and conquer and establish these empires. So I'm going to give you the list of the empires we're going to look at right here at the front. So there's going to be two Chinese dynasties we're going to talk about, the Ming and the Qing. We'll get to that Manchu stuff in just a little bit. In Japan, there's going to be a very powerful state where Japan unites under a leader called Ieyasu Tokugawa. We call this the Tokugawa shogunate. We'll talk about what's going on in Japan for the first time in this period. South Asia, there will be a big land-based empire called the Mughal. Middle East, the Safavids and the Ottomans are going to be in the Mediterranean. So you're going to need to know these empires. Not as important to us as the global empires of the European maritime empires, but still they're going to have an impact on interregional interactions. Today, we're going to do the Chinese dynasties. Anytime we talk about China, I've told you this before, it's really important. Lots of China questions on AP exams. You really always want to know the Chinese history, especially. So let's talk about the first Chinese dynasty. First Chinese dynasty is the Ming. Now, the Ming actually get established at the end of period one in the 1360s and the 1370s. The Ming are the ones that drive the Mongols out of China. The Chinese unite, they rise up, drive the Mongols out. When the Ming are established, they're going to rule as a traditional Chinese dynasty. By traditional, I mean like the Song. Confucianist scholar bureaucrats, civil service exam, patriarchy, all that stuff we talked about, okay? Now, one of the things really interesting, we're going to talk about this in just a second in a lot of detail, is they're going to fund the voyages of Zheng He. Zheng He was a Chinese maritime explorer who originally travels all over the Indian Ocean, facilitating trade for China. There's lots of political prestige. They fund these voyages to show the world that China is back and ruled by a traditional Chinese dynasty. It has political significance, economic significance. And the Zheng He is going to go all over the Indian Ocean trading. It's important to know this, though. At the end of period one, there's a very important story I'm going to tell about this later. They're going to rebuild much of the Great Wall of China, what is now up in China as the Great Wall of China. Parts of it go back all the way to 200 BC. But most of the Great Wall of China that's there in China today was built by the Ming. It was built to keep the Mongols out. They drove them out. They didn't want the Mongols coming back. So they built this to defend themselves. Uh-oh, it's 12 o'clock. Cover your ears. Oh, it's about to happen. I can't pause the video. Oh, no. Here it comes. Oh, there's a delay. Apparently, it's not going to work if there's an actual emergency. We're all doomed. There we are. I'm going to eat some Doritos for a second. chili flavored. Nectar of the gods. God does not want me to make this video on this beautiful Saturday morning. Between the party going across the street and that noise today, there have been challenges, but we shall overcome. Hold on, it's almost done. They're playing good music across the street right now. All right, so most of what is now the Great Wall of China was built by the Ming. So, and again, it was built to keep the Mongols out. Thought it was over. All right, so like I was saying, most of what is now the Great Wall of China was built to keep the Mongols out and to keep them from returning. And that is going to be successful, but we'll talk about that more later on. All right, the Ming are also going to do something very important. They're going to stop using paper money. You might ask yourself, Quattro, why would you stop using paper money? Paper money is an awesome form of currency. You're right, it is. The problem with paper money is it's very easy to counterfeit. So they're having massive problems with counterfeiting, so they move away from printed money. They're going to turn to adopting a silver-backed currency. Silver has always been the most precious metal in China. They're going to go to a silver currency in this time period, which means, what do you have to have silver? Silver currency, I should say, access to silver. Who's the world's largest producer of silver? The Spanish. And this is why the Ming and the Spanish are going to need each other. And they're going to trade through the Philippines like we've been talking about. And the Ming are going to import Spanish silver, specifically peso de ocho. And then once that silver reaches China, it could go anywhere. It could go all over the Silk Road. It could reach South Asia. And again, remember we said Spanish silver is the closest thing we're going to see in this unit to a global currency. Going to limit outside influence. This is important. The Ming eventually stop the voyages of Zheng He. When they do so, they believe that they are so big and so powerful and so wealthy and have assumed the rightful position that Chinese dynasties always have of being the dominant world power, that there's nothing out in the world that they really need besides a little bit of trade with Spain. And they're going to turn their backs on the rest of the world. They think they're the dominant power on Earth. But interestingly enough, right as they are making this decision to withdraw from world affairs and become isolationists, 1450s, 1460s, that's right when Europeans are starting global voyages of exploration. One of the states that could have stopped European global dominance was the Ming. But right as European states were becoming naval powers, the Ming stopped. The Ming are going to voluntarily dismantle their navy and only be a local land-based power. And this is going to allow European power to grow with no checks or balances this whole time period. In China, it's a time of great, great, great prosperity. But what they don't realize is they're falling behind an unseen power. And those unseen powers is the rise of the global European maritime networks. Now, I want to go back to the story of Zheng He. Zheng He was a Chinese bureaucrat who undertakes voyages of exploration off and on for 17 years. He explores all over the Indian Ocean. He makes his way as far west as Africa. My favorite Zheng He story was in 1422. He comes back to the imperial palace in Beijing, and he tells the emperor, "Boss, boy, do I have something for you." And the Ming emperor's like, "Whatever, Zheng, I have everything. I've seen everything. There's literally nothing you can do that's going to impress me." And Zheng He's like, "Hold that thought. Fellas, bring it in." And what comes walking into the Forbidden City in the mid 1400s? A giraffe. And the Chinese look at that thing and go, what the crap is that? They're so confused. They think it's a unicorn. This is how far Zheng He traveled. And this is before the Europeans. This is the end of period one, have started to come to the Indian Ocean. China has the potential to become the dominant world naval power right when naval power is becoming super strong and super important. But then the emperor dies. And the new emperor decides that all this money they're spending on the voyages of Zheng He is not worth it, that economically they're not getting anything back. Everybody who he comes into contact with, they don't have anything that the Ming need, and it's just not necessary. And what the Ming do, and I would argue this is the greatest mistake any state has ever made in world history, is this. The Ming stop the voyages of Zheng He. The Ming take all the money they had invested in their navy and they pull it out, and China will never be a naval power again. And instead, they're going to use this money to rebuild the Great Wall of China. They think the biggest threat to China are the Mongols coming back. They think the biggest threat to China are these Central Asian land-based enemies. What they don't realize is the real threat is going to come to them by sea. It is going to take 200 years of letting European power grow globally unchecked. And they were one of the groups of people who could have stopped the rise to power of European states, and they chose not to. They have no idea this is happening on the scale that it is. And meanwhile, Europeans are growing so powerful based on their access to global resources. China's not going to feel the effects of this into the next period, but just know that as the unit goes, the Chinese think they're the most advanced group of people, but actually they're not, and the gap is growing the later we get into this period. Now, the Ming are going to collapse in the 1630s. Remember that we said the Ming rule like a traditional Chinese dynasty. One of the things that means is they have to constantly show the Chinese people that have kept the mandate. Well, long story, super short. There was a series of unpopular emperors who were seen to be more interested in the pleasures of being an emperor than actually looking out for the Chinese people. And then there was a flood. And what comes with a flood? Famine. And the enemies of the Ming emperor start to claim the Ming have lost the mandate. And there's a massive peasant revolt against the Ming in the 1630s. The Ming emperor, in order to help put this rebellion down, hires foreign missionaries from a part of what is now China, but has not traditionally been part of China, a region called Manchuria. And Manchu soldiers backed the emperor, and they come into China literally with guns blazing, and they put this rebellion down. But after they put the rebellion down, they take a look at it and go, wait a minute, we're the only army standing and we have guns. And the Manchu, these foreign invaders that were hired by the emperor, turn on the emperor and drive him out of power, and the Manchus will start a Chinese dynasty. This will be the second time in Chinese history that China will be ruled by foreigners, and this dynasty will be called the Qing. Now, the Qing is much more important to us than the Ming, because I'll explain later why. But you need to know the Qing. You need to know everything I'm about to tell you about them in a lot of depth. The Qing are going to rule from 1639 to 1911. They are the last Chinese dynasty. We're just going to talk about the Qing during period 2 today. Cover a great amount of territory. They actually control more land than modern day China has. That sounds like a big empire to me. So we're going to G-Persia them super fast. What's their geography? East Asia. You can see this map. This was the Qing dynasty at its height. Politically, all the traditional themes of China, because the Qing are assimilators. The Qing are going to say, we have the mandate. The Qing are going to keep the Confucianist scholar bureaucracy. They're going to keep the civil service exam. All the stuff that has always been true about China continues with the Qing, except for one thing, and we'll talk about that in just a second. All the religions you see in China are the traditional religions. Same thing we've talked about: Neo-Confucianism, Taoism, Buddhist class, Muslim merchants in big cities living in diasporic communities. All those things continue. And interestingly enough, Catholicism for the first time gains a foothold under the work of a missionary named Matteo Ricci. Ricci has limited success by going into China and trying to convert natives by assimilating Catholicism with local beliefs. He has some success, but unfortunately, after his death, a series of popes undermined him, saying you have to conduct services in Latin. And then the Chinese, who felt like they didn't want anything to do with European culture, Chinese emperors outlawed Catholicism. Interestingly enough, though, the place in East Asia that will have the biggest impact of the arrival of these Catholic missionaries will be Korea. Catholic missionaries that started off in China end up in Korea, and you're going to see a large class of Christians in Korea by the end of this unit. If you know anything about Asia, the most Christian region of Asia is Korea, even to this day. So while it's not going to gain much of a foothold in China itself, you do start to see an increase in Catholicism, at least temporarily. Socially, the ruling class of Manchus are going to segregate themselves from the biggest ethnic group of people in China, who are called the Han. They're going to keep all of Chinese traditions, but they are going to force Han Chinese to show a sign of submission. And this sign of submission is wearing the queue. The queue is a very distinctive hairstyle. And this was a sign of submission and acknowledgement that you believed that the Qing had the mandate. So this was very unique. This is a social change, all right? And it's a sign. And again, so the Manchus adopt all the trappings of Chinese rule, but they themselves keep themselves separate. Innovations, nothing. And that's a big problem. All the big innovations in this unit are European. That's a big change. In period one, it was all Asia, especially China. And now they're falling so far behind. Economically, global power. They are on the Silk Road, and they are on Pacific Ocean trade. They're trading the Pacific with the Spanish, and they're also still trading on the Silk Road. Now, Silk Road trade is still a thing. It's just what the people on the Silk Road don't understand is it is diminishing in importance. All the major interactions in this time period are taking place by sea. So emphasis on land-based interactions is part of the problem that's going to cause the Qing to fall further and further behind. But Silk Road trade is still continuing. They are still exporting traditional Chinese goods on the Silk Road, in addition to what they're exporting to the Philippines to trade for Spanish silver. Why do they need Spanish silver? Because, again, there's a silver-based currency, and the Qing, or the Manchus, if you want to use it that way, force all Chinese that they rule to pay their taxes in silver. So again, this emphasizes an enormous quantity of silver needs to continually be coming to China. One of the big themes of this unit is populations grow globally. And we keep saying, why is that? Because Columbian Food Exchange. Columbian Food Exchange reaches the Manchus during this time period. It's going to help them because they're never going to have a hard time feeding growing populations. Corn reaches China. A lot of people don't know this. China is the world's second leading producer of corn in the world today. Lots of people in China eat corn. That's going to have an impact on populations. Potatoes, especially sweet potatoes, are going to have a big impact. And new nutritious foods are going to lead to growing populations. And the population is going to boom. This is a time period of great prosperity. I said that with the Ming. I continue this with the Qing. Economically, they're doing very well. They have abundant trade. They have wealth. Things are peaceful once the Qing establish power. And here's the analogy I like to make. If you are standing in China in 1750 at the end of this unit, all you see are sunny skies. You see wealth, peace, prosperity, happiness, traditional Chinese ways of life. You look around at your immediate neighbors and you're way wealthier and more powerful than them. It's hard to argue that the Qing do not have the mandate. Things are going so well. In fact, in 1750, things are going so well that for the first time ever, a Chinese emperor says, you know what, we're doing so well, we don't need to collect taxes from the peasants. That's how well economically things were going. But this peace and stability and prosperity, these metaphorical sunny skies are hiding the fact that storm clouds are on the horizon. By this point, European states have grown in power now for 250 years, and China thinks they're the richest, wealthiest, most powerful country, most innovative region on earth, and in fact they are way behind, and a European tsunami is coming for them. But once you start to see the storm clouds, it's too late. They're going to ultimately pay the piper for 250 years of withdrawing from world affairs and isolationism, but they're not going to pay that price until period 3. So just know that at the end of period 2, the Qing are still in power, and things seem like they're going awesome, but that peace and prosperity and stability is masking a giant European threat that's coming for them in period 3. Just want to summarize. So there's 4 Chinese dynasties that we talk about in this class. I just wanted to put this all in one place for you. The Song, Yuan, Ming, and then the Qing, which are the Manchus. The Yuan and Qing at the times where foreign groups rule. The Mongols rule the Yuan. The Qing rule the Manchus. The Qing is ruled by the Manchus, is what I'm trying to say. Also, pro tip, you spell the word 3 with 2 E's. Why can't I change that? There we go. Good job by me. And the Qing actually continued to the earliest parts of period 4. So you got to know what dynasties go with what time periods. You need to know that all of these are traditional Chinese dynasties except the Mongols, which have some of their own little unique traits. But this stuff was really a big deal. Hope you paid attention. Make sure you get this stuff. And we're going to continue with land-based empires starting tomorrow.